Good morning. This is the Blaine's World podcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. You can also listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And in addition, you can get more information and listen to previous shows on the Blaine's World website, which is www.blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. It's my pleasure now to introduce Dave Bates with Dave Bates Music. And Dave, you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. Okay, and that's the amazing Dave Bates, as you'll see. Dave, I should mention, was born in Cambridge, Ohio, and started taking piano lessons in the second grade. He tried his hand at songwriting while still in elementary school. Very cool. You actually wrote a song in elementary school?
I did.
Do you still have that song?
Well, in retrospect, it wasn't a great song.
Okay. But
and I still remember a melody.
Okay, great. He graduated from Capital University with a bachelor's degree in math education, and then from Ohio State University with a master's degree in math and computer science. He spent several years teaching college-level math. In the mid-1980s, he left the teaching job to become an unemployed writer and musician. Since then, he has supported himself with a regular church job and also being music director and accompanist for various theater productions. He's also written 7 full-length musicals and hundreds of songs. And Dave, let me ask you the first question. So you grew up as a kid in Ohio. Did you always know you wanted to be into music?
No.
What got you into it?
Originally,
yeah,
an odd story. When I was 5 years old, we moved from a fairly small house into a much bigger house. My mother had a drop leaf table. My grandmother had a piano. And when we had the bigger house, they decided to swap furniture. And suddenly, at age 5, here was this piano sitting in the house that had never been there before. And I was intrigued by it and wanted to take lessons, having no particular musical interest or talent at that point, and started taking lessons in second grade, as we said. And got to a point, anyone who's taken piano lessons knows that the first year or so, it's not fun because nothing you play really sounds like music. But I stayed with it enough that I got to the point where I was playing things that sounded nice.
Yeah. How long did you continue with the piano lessons?
I took piano for 6 years.
Okay.
And very early on, I thought I cannot afford to buy sheet music for every song that I want to play. And so I decided I'm going to teach myself to play by ear. And I could pick out melodies, but the mystery of what the left hand was doing kind of eluded me. I remember asking my piano teacher, and either she didn't understand what I was asking, or she understood but didn't think I was ready to learn that, or maybe she tried to explain it and it just didn't work for me. But at any rate, after 6 years of piano lessons, I took 1 year of guitar lessons, which is all about the chord structures and harmonies and so on. And I've often said that was the most valuable year of piano lessons I ever took. That unlocked the mystery of what the left hand was doing.
Do you still play the guitar?
No.
No?
I don't have my calluses anymore. Guitar is painful if you don't play it.
So talk about, so you started as a young kid, then you were playing. Throughout school, were you in orchestra or were you playing in organized groups?
A little bit. I took saxophone lessons in school, and I appreciate that because I learned something about how woodwind instruments work. We lived out in the country. The school I went to was 14 miles from where we lived. My parents worked 10 miles in the opposite direction, and so transportation was always a problem. So I couldn't do any extracurricular music things at school.
So what happened then to being this musical guy So all of a sudden you got into math education. What was that all about?
It was not all of a sudden. I loved math. I was a good student, and I was fascinated with math, and wanted to be a college math teacher, and got the degree and taught math for several years and loved it. But at that same time, I was writing music and writing musical plays, and thought, I don't want to get to age 65 and say, no, I wish I'd tried harder. And so I just decided I'm going to take a couple years off to see what happens if I devote my full time to music, and thinking if it doesn't work out, I'll go back to teaching. And I never went back to teaching.
Did you ever want to teach music education?
No,
No?
no. I was afraid that if I had to teach it, I wouldn't enjoy it much.
So talk a little bit about the fact then that all of a sudden, I mean, that's a gutsy move to leave a full-time gig to become an unemployed musician, or at
Yeah.
that point in time. So so you started doing music. Did you then have gigs, or were you just writing music at the time, or doing both?
A little of both. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, yeah.
I was living in Chapel Hill at the time, and had a semi-regular job at a restaurant where I could go and just sit there for 2-3 hours and play show tunes, and really helped develop my piano skills.
And we'll talk about that, because I know you still do this, which is really cool. I sat in one of these sessions, which was so much fun. You just get people together and sing, and you enjoy having them do that.
Oh yeah, yeah, I love that.
We'll talk a little bit about that then, Dave. So one of the things I've always admired about you is that in addition to writing music, writing plays, doing all this other stuff, was it twice a month you actually play piano for a group of folks?
Yeah, we do a sing along. At the time, I was accompanist for a church choir that took the summer off. And a couple of people in the church choir said, well, we kind of like to keep singing over the summer. And I said, fine, I'll get together and sing with you. We won't do church music. We will do Broadway show tunes and pop songs from the 60s and so on. And we started doing that. And then word spread, and it opened up to the church itself, and then to the wider community. And now we typically get maybe 15 to 20 people who show up twice a month. It's a different crowd every time. We have regulars, but it's not always the same people. And I make it very clear, we're not rehearsing. There's no performance at the end of the group. We are just here singing for fun.
And do they have to be able to sing?
No. This group exists for people who are afraid to audition for the choral society or the symphony chorus.
Well, talk a little bit about that, Dave, in terms of people coming out to sing. I've heard it discussed, I've never discussed it with you, but actually all people can pretty much sing, some I guess better than others. But what about the people, I guess you come across this, that say they can't sing or they can't carry a tune? Do you find that a lot?
We have found it, yes.
Yeah.
And, this is a group, and so you hope that the people who can't sing have softer voices and we don't hear them as much. Only once have we had someone who couldn't sing and was a loud voice and was kind of disruptive, but she didn't stick around for long.
Oh, good boy, you were lucky. Talk a little bit about that then. So if folks want to kind of just check this out, you do this, what, twice a month? Where do you do this at?
We do this at the Unitarian Universalist Church.
Okay.
Corner of Charlotte and Edwin.
And I'll mention it that if somebody wants to get more information about it, it's just a fun thing. I'll talk about my experience with it, but they should just contact you, I guess, by email or phone. You can tell them more if they want it.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
My phone number, 828-252-0634.
Let me just have you repeat that. 828.
252-0634. Like many people, I don't answer my phone unless I know who's calling.
Join the crowd.
But leaving a message is always an option.
Okay. And also you mentioned to me off the air, they could also send you an email.
Email davebates95@yahoo.com.
Okay. And just inviting people, if they're interested, they like this idea of coming together for a sing-along. And the music is typically Broadway stuff, or it's other stuff as well.
The sing-along books that we have, it's kind of in 4 different sections. The first section, and seemingly the most popular section with this group, is all Broadway songs. We go back to, I think the earliest ones date to the 20s and 30s, things like All the Things You Are and Old Man River. And then we go through South Pacific, My Fair Lady, Camelot, Fiddler on the Roof, Chorus Line. So that's probably the first third of the book. Then there are maybe 10 pages of my original songs, which if I do say so myself, they stack up very well against the Broadway standards.
Okay.
And then we have a bunch of movie themes. Things like Over the Rainbow, Moon River, Que Sera, Sera, The Rose. And then the fourth section is just pop songs, a lot of them from the 50s and 60s. Things like, the Carpenters, John Denver.
How about any newer stuff?
I stopped paying attention to music. I always say that the last Broadway show that I really got the music under my belt was Phantom of the Opera in 1988. There have been a couple shows since then. I think the only song in our book, Broadway song more recent than that, is the one from Rent, Seasons of Love.
It's funny, Dave. I'm sort of like that too. I don't know about you, but I force myself to watch the Grammy Awards once a year because I have no idea of the music, And
so it's, don't have any idea of the people either.
Right. So it's so if you're interested in some of the other music or standards, come to one of these sing-alongs. And let's talk also, Dave, about some other stuff you've done. So you've been doing these songs. How long have you been doing these sing-alongs?
We started in 1997.
Wow, is that tremendous?
26 years.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
Once because of weather and once because I had COVID.
And that was it. That's
when I've been out of town.
Yeah.
But those were more planned.
And I would just encourage people, if you ever get a chance to either participate in this or something else that Dave Bates does, take advantage of it because you're going to like it. And I can just say that one time we were over at your house with a whole bunch of people. That was such a fun thing. People were just singing. But it was fun, Dave, because I guess they really knew the music, or a lot of it, which is helpful.
A lot of it is songs they remember from years ago and they haven't heard recently. I think that's the key. So
when did you then start coming up with the idea that in addition to writing songs, started as a 5-year-old, the first song, when did you start deciding to write songs and put together them in a show? When did you get that idea?
It was virtually at the same time. I was introduced to Broadway music when I was in 4th grade. My music teacher bought me a book with the what to me at the time was the very cryptic title, The King and I. And I had no idea who's this king we're talking about, but the key thing was inside the book, there were songs I knew, songs I had heard before. And so being the precocious child I was, I went to the library and started researching and discovered this whole new world called Broadway musicals.
Do your folks ever take you to a show?
No, they took me occasionally to movies because My Fair Lady and Sound of Music and Mary Poppins, all those movies came out right when I was about 12 years old, and so I got to see that. But we lived in rural Ohio. Theater did not exist, and we never traveled to New York or anything like that.
Do you remember the first musical you ever saw?
On stage live?
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember it. It was Stop the World, I Want to Get Off.
Okay, wow.
At Cambridge Barn Theater, which was I don't even know if it's still there now, but I was probably 18 years old. I decided I wanted to see this. I went by myself and loved it.
So you decide you're writing songs. When did you write the very first musical, from individual songs to become a musical?
My first, I have to say here, there's a difference between my first musical and the first musical that I still lay claim to. It's in there that I look back on and think, that I burned this.
Was it produced though?
No.
Oh, the first time. Okay. So what was the first musical that got produced?
The first musical that got produced was called Confetti. I was living in Chapel Hill at the time, but I heard about SART, Southern Appalachian Repertory Theater, up in Mars Hill, and submitted a play. I submitted one the year before, which was the first one that I had, and I found out later that it came in second place when they were picking which one they wanted to do. And since then, I've revised it greatly. So I'm actually glad that it didn't get produced, because I wouldn't have kept working on it. But Confetti is an interesting, I call it a political, farcical allegory, all about an attempt to corner the confetti market. And in the process, it brings up issues of wealth inequality and dictatorships, and it's an interesting show.
So SART actually produced that was the first time?
In 1989, I think was the year.
Very exciting. Now, was that the regular run, or was it their new play competition?
Well, SART's charter says that they produce at least one new play a year.
I'm sorry I wasn't around then, but SART at the time was like in its heyday. They really had some outstanding performers, musicians. So that must have been very exciting for you to see this on stage.
Yeah.
Was it ever done afterwards?
Yes. There have been 2 high school productions since then. One of them, I was very pleased. It was someone who had seen the show at SART and contacted me and said, I want to do this with my high school students.
Now, one of the things, Dave, I think that makes you so unique in a very positive way is that you don't only write the music, you write the lyrics, you actually write the play itself. There aren't too many people who do all that at one time, are there?
That's true. There aren't a lot of well-known people who do. The only one that comes to mind, his name is not that familiar, Lionel Bart, wrote Oliver. He does music, lyrics, and the script.
Okay, he's done okay with that play, right? You think he did okay with that?
Yeah, it's fine. It's not one of my great favorites, but I believe that, I don't know if it's still the case, at one time it was the longest running show in London.
Now, do you do that with all your shows? And how many shows overall have you written again?
7.
7. On all of them, have you done all 3 parts to it?
Yes.
And now here's the question. In addition to all 3 parts, have you also played the piano in some of them?
Yes.
Okay. So you do it all. You do the first show. I love the name of it, Confetti. What got you going into the second one?
The second show that was produced was called Apples. It's the Johnny Appleseed legend. I grew up rural Ohio, very much the heart of Johnny Appleseed country. At the time, I kind of wondered, we hear about Johnny Appleseed in Ohio. I wasn't sure if other people in other parts of the world had ever heard of him. And I was kind of relieved to find when I moved to North Carolina that yes, people had heard of Johnny Appleseed.
So talk about the process then. After you write something, or as you're writing it, it's sort of a several step process, because then you have to get somebody to put it on, in other words, you write it.
That's
so
a totally different side of things.
I know you and I have talked about that's not necessarily your favorite side of things.
No, it's the side I have no skill at all at.
But the incredible thing is, so each of these 7 shows, so you wrote them, and then each one has been produced somewhere, shown somewhere?
There, the first one that I wrote is called The Practice Room. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been extensively revised since then, but we did a staged reading of it with some friends back in Chapel Hill, pre-revision, but it's never been produced.
So out of the 7, how many have been produced?
1, 2, 3, 4. 4.5, shall we say. Well, one of them had a workshop production, but it's not a real production. It was not on a stage. It was in more of a classroom and so on. So I can't quite claim that as a full production, but I can talk about it.
So if anybody's watching or listening to this, though, and they want to get involved in producing a play, they could certainly contact you, because you have a couple of them are produced, but a couple are kind of waiting to be produced. Is that kind of where they stand?
Sure.
Okay. So what happens then, in addition to these 7 shows, I had the pleasure, and I'd like to talk about both of them, because I saw both of them, to see actual reviews you put together. They were so fine. You did one review several years ago at North Carolina Stage.
Right.
What was the name of that?
Well, the name of the review is 7 Singers Singing. Now, the one we did at North Carolina Stage had songs from the other shows that I've written. And after we produced that, I thought, no, I've got enough other songs that aren't part of any other show. Sometimes what happens is you write a song intending for it to be part of a show, and then for whatever reason it doesn't quite fit, or the show may not materialize or whatever. So there are songs that are not part of a show, and I decided when I do another version of 7 Singers Singing, it's all songs that aren't part of shows.
And so that was the one at North Carolina Stage several years ago. Yes. Then you did another version, another songs at Magnetic?
Was at Magnetic, yes.
Okay. And so that was the idea. We saw stuff that had not been part of any other show at that time?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how was that? How do you feel about putting together the reviews? Did you enjoy that process?
I did. I'm not sure what part of the process you mean, the writing of it, the production of it. I'm not a producer. I have learned that. There are too many things you have to deal with. My big question with producing, which do you do first? Do you line up the performers?
Right.
Or do you line up the space? Because lining up spaces is harder than you think it's going to be. And they say, oh, we have one weekend available in April or whatever. And then you go back to the performers, and they say, oh, I'm going to be out of town that weekend.
Right.
So trying to coordinate both of those, I found very uncomfortable.
Well, and you told me too, it was not only uncomfortable, the problem with that, you try to have rehearsals, and to try to get 7 people together for rehearsal isn't the easiest thing in the world.
Right.
So to get it together. So you did these 2 reviews. Let's talk a little bit about kind of moving forward. I know I'm very excited that you're going to be doing another, not a review, an actual show. But here I guess we'll call you the music director or the accompanist, or what do you want to call it? But talk about the latest show you're working on with somebody, Dave. You're helping out.
Right. The show is called At the Cafe, which music. Well, I don't know the person who wrote the music, but the play and the lyrics were written by Marcy Gallagher, who's a friend of mine here in town. It's going to be produced in August at one of the smaller theaters in the Diane Wortham complex.
By the way, the person who wrote the music part of it was Sarah Kawes, a very talented local musician. But what was your reaction to that, Dave? You came in on it, but I don't know if that's a common thing, that Marcy had never written, not only had she never written a show, she never written a musical before. Do people, I mean, that must have been quite a challenge for her to write words without, you know, I don't know how she did it without music.
Well, that's the age-old question. When you have a songwriting team, do you write the words first? Do you write the music first? I personally I could count on the number, I could count on the fingers of one hand how often I have written the words first and then put the music to it. It's just not how I work.
You write the music first and
I
then
always write the music first. Sometimes I will have a phrase or a line of lyrics that suggests the music, but I've never written out the whole lyric and then tried to put music to it.
How about the title to music? Does that come before you write the song or after the song title?
It usually comes before, but you know, that's a song does not live or die by its title.
Are you working as we speak, or not as we speak, when we get off the podcast? Are you presently working on any songs, or are you always working on songs?
Well, okay, there's a difference between songs versus compositions. There are some things that I write, it's music that's never intended to have words to it. And so I often, you know, that's kind of a hobby. I'll just sit down at the keyboard and start playing and see if a nice melody suggests itself.
Do you ever come up with a song and 20 years later you revisit it and want to change it or modify it, or does that happen?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you're saying back, you know, a 5-year-old song probably needs some work on.
One of the songs in Seven Singers Singing, in fact, I had written lyrics to it. Oh gosh, back in, it must have been 1985. And I decided the lyrics weren't working. And so I scrapped them completely and wrote different lyrics. You may remember the song, it was called Never Kiss Me.
The just all the songs were phenomenal, but what's amazing too about that is you also put together a great cast, you know, and some of the folks you're still friendly with, but that was just, I don't know how you did it, but both shows I thought were so spot on.
It was a process. I contacted over 24 people for this last show saying, would you be available? Would you be interested? And yeah, I was starting to wonder, am I ever going to really find people? Yeah.
Okay, well, and again, the challenge was you had to get 7. You know, it's one thing to get 2 or 3, but 7,
yeah,
you pull them both off. But you know, it's just, you and I have talked off the air about someday I'd like to have other people see that, you know, hear it. It's just such beautiful music. What about other people, Dave, in terms of if they want to write music? We'll use you as an example. When you write music, do you write it every day, or do you get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and work for 2 hours? What's your style of writing?
No, I'm much, much less disciplined than that. I have a certain amount of music in my life. As we said, I'm a church music director, and so there's playing piano for, you know, other people's music. It kind of depends on what I feel like doing, and you know, sometimes I'm into writing a song. Writing the music itself tends to come fairly easily to me. Writing lyrics takes a much greater effort. Writing a script, somewhere in between. And if I'm excited about the project, yeah, I can devote hours and hours a day to it. But if I don't have a project that I'm really excited about, yeah, I can go days without doing anything creative.
If somebody is listening or watching this, wants to write music, especially for shows like you or show tunes, do you have any advice for them other than, well, I should ask you what the advice is.
I don't know that I do have any advice. And I think my first bit of advice is be a competent musician. There have been people in the past who've come to me and said, I've written this music. Well, and then they proceed to hum it. And I start asking questions like, do you have a rhythm or a beat, and they can't even communicate it well, much less put it on paper. If you can't put it on paper, you're not really writing music.
Okay, so it's good advice to learn to be a musician first would be helpful. And again, I guess piano is most helpful, but it could be other instruments as well.
Well, not really. I think it's safe to say within the music world, everyone is expected to be somewhat competent on the piano. Even if you're a French horn player, you don't need to be able to look at a line of music and plunk it out on a keyboard.
Okay, so it's good we switched from the saxophone back to the piano. It's been hard to be doing this on the saxophone.
Anything that a wind instrument, you can only play one note at a time. And that's why we have such things as jazz bands and orchestras and symphonies, because it takes a whole bunch of people. Piano, you can play multiple notes at a time, which means you're not just playing melody, you're playing the harmony. And it's hard to get a sense of full harmonies if you're playing a solo instrument.
Let me put you on the spot, Dave. I kind of asked you before about number of songs. So you've 7 musicals, you've written lots of other songs as well. Ballpark, how many songs do you think you've written?
I would say roughly 150, maybe 200. And that does not include a lot of compositions, musical things that don't have words to them and probably never will.
Now, out of the 150 to 200, do you know all of them, or you could come back and revisit them?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
I'm sorry. So the songs, if I asked you to play one song, could you play, do you know it kind of, or do you have to go back to the music?
No, I could probably play it just fine. There's a reasonable chance that I could sing the lyrics from memory.
Okay, incredible. Dave, I want to try something with you too. If we get lucky, it's going to work, but I really wanted people to hear some of your music. Okay, so we're going to try this one of 2 ways. So I'm talking with Dave Bates. And Dave Bates is this incredible music guy who writes shows, he writes words, he writes lyrics. And out of 200 songs, I'm not going to ask you to do all 200 of them, Dave.
Oh,
we're going to try only 195. But what we're going to do, Dave, is we're going to kind of say goodbye here in a second, and then we'll put it on pause. And if we get lucky, we'll be able to add in the 2 songs. We're going to ask you to play 2 songs. If we don't get lucky, I want to ask you to repeat, Dave. If folks want to get in touch with you, the best bet is to do what?
They could call me at 828-252-0634 or email at davebates95 at yahoo.com. I have a Gmail account also, but we don't use that. And I was also going to mention, I do have songs on a YouTube channel.
Please. And that's what?
The channel name is Dave Bates Music, and I tell people YouTube does not make it easy to find me. There are multiple Dave Bateses in the world. So what you do if you want to find my channel is go to YouTube, type in Dave Bates Music, and then you should see a blue spirograph logo.
Right.
Click that logo. As I explain it to people, typing in Dave Bates Music is equivalent to walking by a store on the sidewalk. The logo is equivalent to walking into the store.
And if so glad you mentioned that. It told my producer, Cappy Tassetti, that, yeah, I went to Dave Bates, and there were a lot of Dave Bates, like you said, but when I found your stuff, and I mentioned one thing, if you are fortunate enough to find Dave Bates Music, go beyond just the first screen, because you'll see several songs, but then you'll see lots and lots of other songs if you go beyond that first screen. So
right. Well, if you don't click on the logo, it will give you 2 or 3 songs and then go to other things.
Okay.
Clicking on the logo will keep you on my channel.
I'm going to invite folks, if you want to check out Dave Bates Music, you're going to be impressed. Check out his channel. You can also, I think I just subscribed to it. You can also subscribe to it to find out any new stuff comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so certainly do that. Dave, I want to have you introduce, fingers crossed, the 2 songs we're going to try to play. If they don't play, we're just going to thank you for being my guest, and also invite folks to see Dave next. Well, I should ask, there are 2 other ways to see you. So you can see Dave at the cafe. He's going to be doing that. He's going to be playing the piano. You can see him at one of his church, his every other week gigs. And you also mentioned you're a regular pianist for a church.
Yes.
Which church is that?
It's a tiny Methodist church over in Candler called Oak Hill Methodist.
Okay, and so you're there every Sunday?
Yep.
Okay, and on top of that, boy, you keep busy. On top of that, you also play for the what's the group locally?
Jewish secular community.
Right, you play for that once a month?
Typically once a month. Their schedule is a little looser. They sometimes have other people or are doing other things.
Well, you're doing other things too. And yeah. Dave, what I'll have you do is introduce again the 2 songs we want to try to play for people. Tell the names of them and where they're from. And if we get lucky, people will be able to see it. But what are the 2 songs you want to try to play?
Absolutely. The first one is called Magical Moments, and it is from this show called The Practice Room, which has never been produced. But the show is about 2 college students who are both music majors, guy and a girl. He's a pianist. She's a vocalist. I tell people this is totally non-autobiographical. Although I admit I spent a lot of time in little practice rooms with vocalists during my college career. But this song is where they both discover their love of Broadway musicals. And in the course of this song, I've counted before, I want to say there are like 68 different musicals mentioned or referenced by terms of songs that are in them or characters or something.
So let me do this. I'm going to pause this. We're going to try to play this first song. Then hopefully we'll come back and have you introduce the second song if we get lucky. Okay?
Okay.
So I'm going to, give me a second. So if you're watching this, you'll see a brief pause, but David's going to try to cue up the music. So go to it, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're back now, thanks to Dave's technical brilliance. And Dave, we're going to play this first song.
Magical moments that we all know and love. Those show-stopping numbers we have fond memories of.
The songs like My Favorite Things and Old Devil Moon.
Perfect.
The spanking scene and Kiss Me Kate.
The Kilts and Brigadoon.
Remember the orchestra and I Love My Wife.
The moment in Fiddler when they toasted to life.
The urchins in Oliver, the lovers from 9.
The song with dirty lyrics that she does in chorus line.
Oh,
the small town charm of Music Man.
Oh, the fly flying scenes from Peter Pan. That was grand, magical moments with such polish and flair.
The opening of Pippin,
Or the happening in Hair.
the psychic phenomenon of On a Clear Day,
The Aggie dance in Whorehouse.
and the girls in Cabaret.
Remember Yul Brynner as the king of Siam.
Or George in drag singing I Am What I Am. Or Angela Lansbury's performance as Mame.
The chorus of Marines who sang There's nothing like a dame.
Magical moments, may their charms never cease. There's Wicked and Rent, there's Bye Bye Birdie and Grease.
The raft in Big River.
And the junkyard and Cats.
The scene from Hello Dolly in the store that sells the hats.
I cried when Cervantes sang Impossible Dream.
I thought Sweeney Todd was just an absolute scream. And promises, promises were wonderful fun.
And how we love the Wild West show and Annie Get Your Gun. Oh, the merriment of company.
Oh, the dances in Sweet Charity.
That's for me. Magical moments, a delight through and through.
There's Follies and Miss Saigon.
And Avenue Q.
Those hummable melodies from Anything Goes.
Or Ethel Merman's tour de force as Gypsy's Mama Rose.
The junior executives and How to Succeed.
The Orphans and Annie. The Sheik from Candide.
Gwen Verdon as Lola, what a devilish delight.
The scene when Julie Andrews sang I Could Have Danced All Night.
Magical moments will keep coming because of shows like
Pajama Game.
Evita.
Applause
Chicago.
and Camelot, and who could forget
Laughs in the producers. Or the intrigue in Kismet.
the crap game in Guys and Dolls that went on for years.
The ending of Carousel that left us in tears. The glamour of Dreamgirls.
Or the glitz of The Wiz.
The thrills of 42nd Street.
The drama of Les Mis.
Oh, Oklahoma was my favorite score.
Oh, Calcutta showed us so much more.
That's for sure. Magical moments when they burst into song, and soon the whole theater is humming along. Like when Mary Martin did A Wonderful Guy.
And what's that song from Stop the World?
What kind of fool am I?
The soulful simplicity of Porgy and Bess.
The dancers who dazzled us in Starlight Express.
The technical wizardry that Phantom displayed.
Or Barbra Streisand belting out Don't Rain on My Parade. Magical moments, what a joy to behold. Magical moments that will never grow old. Magical moments that most everyone knows. Magical moments from those marvelous musical shows.
Okay, folks, we're back now recording the podcast with my friend and the very talented Dave Bates. And you just heard a fantastic song. I hope if you heard it on podcast, that was great. If you get to see it on YouTube, it's even better, because there are fantastic visuals in that. And Dave, you just did a great job with the visuals. So either way, you're going to like that song. And just a shout out, Dave, could you mention some of the voices were definitely familiar to me? Who are some of the singers in that song?
There are four singers, and they performed this song at the show we did at NC Stage. They were Richard Blue, Ellen Pappas, Ruth Planey, and Russell Watts.
And it's funny because as I'm listening to it, I'm saying to myself, that definitely sounds like Ellen Pappas. So I guessed correctly, and I had the pleasure of seeing her in that show. So we got lucky. We got to show one of the songs. You have another song we're going to try to show Dave as well, and have people listen to it or watch it. And the name of that song is A Zen Blessing Talk a little bit about that song.
Right, okay. The show that this is from is called Kanzen and Jotoko. Kanzen and Jotoko are characters in Zen Buddhist legend. And I became aware of them in a college class about world religions and was fascinated, thought, I think there's a musical waiting to be written about these two characters. It took me a long time to write it, partly because it's set in ancient Japan, and the music had to be suggestive of Japan, but you don't want actual Japanese music because that's just too foreign to Western ears. So I wrote this song, convinced that it would fit nicely into the script of the play somewhere. Didn't have a specific place for it. And then when I got around to writing the script, I found it didn't fit so nicely. Wasn't sure what to do. And a friend who heard the song said, why don't you have the entire cast come out at the end at the curtain call and sing this song as a benediction on the audience? And I thought, of course, why didn't I think of that? That's the perfect use for it.
And so is that's the plan on it? So
yes.
If we can just hear this, Dave, it's all yours.
Okay, hopefully we can hear this.
Should be able to. Perfect.
Oh dear. Let's try this again.
Press play, it should work. There you go.
May your path be strewn with cherry blossoms. May the snow crane dance across your skies.
May the weeping willow bow to greet you. May your sandals be the perfect size.
May your rice bowl not be too long empty, and may all your aches and pains be sore.
May the crickets fill your life with music. May your bonsai never grow too tall.
May the sky gods keep alive your sense of wonder. May the earth gods make you humble as a stone. May the sea gods help you navigate through wind and storm.
May the fire gods kindle dreams you call your own. May the full moon grant you peaceful slumber. May the sun not let you sleep too late. May the bamboo shield you from bad karma. May your enemies' arrows never fly too straight. May the sky gods keep alive your sense of wonder. May the earth gods make you humble as a stone. May the sea gods help you navigate through wind and storm. May the fire gods kindle dreams you call your own. May your path be strewn with cherry blossoms, like a blessing of each dawning day. May the raindrops of your life fall gently, just enough to wash your tears away.
Very nice. And Dave, I'm just going to pause one more second because I want to show one more thing before we let you go. So I'm just going to pause the recording.
Oh,
Thanks, Dave, for playing that other song we just heard. And you were telling me those were the same four people who sang that song as well. Who were they again?
the same four people: Richard Blue, Ruth Planey, Ellen Pappas, and Russell Watson.
Okay, so that got to be seen by other people as well. And then I asked you to show this final screen up. Dave, just describe why we have that up there.
This is for my YouTube channel. Dave Bates Music. And as I said, YouTube doesn't make it easy to find me, so it's important to click on my blue spirograph, and then under playlists.
Okay, you'll see all David's. You're going to post. Yeah, you'll see a whole bunch of songs.
There's a lot of songs, but there are 7 playlists. The most interesting ones, I think, are show tunes, which are songs from the various shows I've written, and 7 Singers Singing, which is the majority of the songs from that review. The other the other playlists involve there's some religious songs that I've done with my church choir. There are some Christmas songs. There are some meditative things. And there's one that's called Faux Classics. We see a picture of that here, which are more classical sounding compositions.
And I just invite people to check out this YouTube channel. You can also, at the same time, you'll have an option to subscribe to it. So I encourage you to subscribe to it as well, because you'll get to see other stuff that Dave's going to be doing in the future. And Dave, I just want to thank you very much for being my guest on this podcast, in that you just amaze me, and I'm saying that in a good way. You've always been one of my favorite local musicians, talents, you name it. Dave Bates is your guy. I'd also like to thank Cappy Giuseppe, my producer. I look forward to having you join me each week on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, you name it, you can find us. Dave will be speaking to you hopefully in the near future. Thanks, buddy.
All right. Thank you, Blaine. Bye.